Welcome to Moment of Clarity. Thanks for being here, folks. Welcome to the new time, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. There's a lot to talk about today. We got a new $2.6 billion package of U.S. military aid going to Ukraine. Javelin missiles being sent to Taiwan. Meanwhile, Americans are being knocked off of Medicaid. Americans are being knocked off of food stamps. That's what goes on while our ruling class funnels more money into war and death and killing. Here at home, they don't mind that people are going without health care, going without food. Not a problem as we send millions and, well, billions, sorry to understate our efforts to have endless war. Finland has joined NATO in a historic shift towards war, more war, always more war, never away from war, always toward war. It has war in the world, the word toward. And meanwhile, the mainstream media just wants you to talk about Trump. Nothing but Trump, 24/7. Trump, Trump, Trump. Just ignore everything else that's going on in the world. Also, the Washington Post, I'll be covering this, does not want you talking about Nord Stream. They have said that leaders, and they wrote about how leaders do not want to dig into what happened in Nord Stream because, they might find out what happened to the Nord Stream pipeline. We've got Marco Rubio saying the quiet part loud. I'm going to show you video of that where he admitted that the reason the petrodollar needs to stay strong is in order to crush other countries, to bend them to our will via sanctions as their poor and ill die off from many of our sanctions. In Montana, we have actually a win, a positive thing. Oh my God, I'm giving you something positive. In Montana, there's a change to policy in Montana thanks to the lawfare. For once, lawfare used for good. Children have brought charges against the Montana state for the existential threat that is climate crisis and doing nothing about it. I'll be talking about that. I'll be showing you video of Nancy Pelosi getting, heckled is not really it doesn't really do justice what she went through. It's really more of a factual bashing of her in front of an audience, which was nice to see. Meanwhile, there is a congressional effort, a small one, but something better than nothing, to actually end the prosecution of Julian Assange after all of these years. The Army has pulled their Be All You Can Be ads after the star of said ads was arrested for assault of a woman, and I'll get into the details of that. Is it that surprising that the face of Army Be All You Can Be was involved in assault? It sounds like that's probably par for the course. The CDC team that is studying the health impacts of the East Palestine train derailment in Ohio all fell ill while claiming, or at least before they showed up, claiming that the area was safe to be in. So they all get sick when they show up there to investigate whether it's safe to be there. And yet they're still not exactly giving saying, hey, this is clearly because there's toxic fumes throughout the area, toxic soil, toxic water. Continued protests in France as talks break down. But of course, your mainstream media wants you to talk about nothing but Donald Trump. Just talk about Trump. And by the way, I did cover I did talk a little bit about the indictments and the arrests the other day. So if you really desperately need Trump coverage from me, then you can go back and watch some of that. I am not, I hope you understand, I'm not going to fall for the let's talk about Trump 24/7 bullshit for multiple reasons. Yes, of course he is. I'll give you a 2-sentence rundown of what's going on with Trump. Yes, of course he is a corrupt billionaire con artist. So are all of our previous presidents. At least in recent years. I'll only speak to the times I've been alive. They've all been corrupt, not billionaire, but millionaire at least. corrupt con artists, war criminals. But you'll notice that's not what they're arresting him for, because that would be all of them. So instead, they had to get him. It's like getting Al Capone on tax evasion if everyone who also captured Al Capone was also involved in the same crimes. It really is like it's a rift in the ruling elite, and I'm not going to defend any of them. That's the other thing, by the way. There is a criticism to be had of those on the left here who are doing nothing, and I mean, the independent media left, not the mainstream media left, which is not left. There is a criticism to put out here of the endless defense of Trump. You can go too far in that regard too. Trump doesn't give a fuck about you. All right. Trump is a billionaire con man, as are many of them. And it is just a rift in the ruling elite in who is going to be the CEO of America Inc. That is all that's going on here. So don't run around defending Trump. Oh, he's a good man. They don't have anything on him. No, they have shit on him. The thing is, they're just ignoring the real shit on him, like being a war criminal, like assassinating Iran's top general with a drone bomb, like dropping the largest ever non-nuclear bomb on Afghanistan. How many innocent people do you think died in that blast? They have plenty of shit on him. They're not going to use any of that, because that goes for all of the American presidents and the American ruling elite in general. All right, well, I'm going to get into all that, so let's do it. I mean, that's a lot of shit. We gotta get started here. I do have a question for you, though, seeing as this is our first story here. The U.S. is, well, I'll give the details in a second, but the question basically in the comment thread, I'd like to hear from you. Does the American ruling class and the American government give a shit about the American people? Do they care? Do they care at all? Now you could say, yeah, they care 10%. You could have a yes. That's got a. I'll let you have a little equivocator there. I'll give you that. So, but you could say they care a little bit. Do they care at all about the American people? So. And here's why I'm posing that question today. The U.S. is sending $2.6 billion more to Ukraine. This is on top of the 10. God, I can't even say the numbers large enough. The 100 billion. There we go. I got it out. This is on top of the 100 billion that has already been sent to Ukraine. That doesn't even count arms and weapons that have been repurposed from Afghanistan. Don't even come back to the United States. They just funnel them straight in to the United States. So that's 2.6 billion more going to Ukraine. On top of that, and this is perhaps the scarier one, on top of that, they are sending Javelin missiles to Taiwan. Here we go. Taiwan is set to receive Javelin missiles and from the U.S. in 2023, and the second batch is going to go in 2024. And this is while cutting Medicaid and food stamps to the American people. So let me tell you a little more about these Javelin missiles, though. Taiwan is expected to take delivery of 400 missiles for 400 Javelin man-portable anti-tank systems purchased from the United States between the second half of this year and 2024, a military source said Friday. The Javelin missiles are part of an arms deal announced by former U.S. President Donald Trump in 2019. Oh, see, he was such a good guy, wasn't he? Which also includes 1,700 and, of course, continued by Biden. They've left that out of here. Announced by Trump, continued by Biden, which also includes 1,700 updated tube-launched optical tracked wire-guided T-2B RF missiles. Now, many of you already know this next part, but the reason this is so outrageous is because Taiwan is part of China. Now, that doesn't mean you can be upset about that. You can go, I don't like it, but it is part of China. You know the number of nations that say Taiwan is part of China? I mean, it's not part of China. Taiwan is his own country. 12. There are 12 countries throughout this world of 200 fucking nations who say that Taiwan is its own country. And one of those is not the United States. The United States still claims, technically on paper, that Taiwan is part of China. So could you imagine China sending arms, sending missiles to an area of the United States to be pointed at the rest of the United States? If China sent missiles to Texas to help in their secession efforts, now I understand if many of you are like, that'd be great, but still, how would the U.S. government, how would the U.S. ruling class respond to such a move? And that's essentially what is happening here. And of course, they're attempting to do the same thing to China that they've done with Russia, which is create a proxy war. Now, I'm not saying it's exactly identical. Obviously, Ukraine is its own country. Taiwan, as I've just said, 90% of nations around this globe say that Taiwan is part of China. That was not true of Ukraine previous to the invasion. So there are differences, but they're trying to achieve the same thing, which is a proxy war between the U.S. and China. This fight in Ukraine is a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia, and they're hoping it will alienate China, cut China off, and create a rift in the allies and partners that China has. But of course, this also pushes all of us towards nuclear war, towards nuclear end times. But perhaps what makes this so egregious is that this is done at the same time that the United States is cutting medical care to so many Americans. Millions set to lose Medicaid coverage as pandemic-era rule expires. Up to 15 million people are expected to lose their insurance in the coming months. Children, young adults, and Black and Hispanic people are most likely to be affected. A pandemic-era rule that protected people from losing their Medicaid coverage. And can I just add in here, this shouldn't have to be a pandemic-era rule. In the United States, everyone should get health care. Sorry to yell. Everyone should have health care. Everyone should have healthcare in the United States. We're one of the only developed countries that doesn't have that, and yet it's just egregious that they do this while they're cutting off. Like they're sending weapons and money to places like Taiwan, to Ukraine, etc., while they claim to not have the money to send it to give it to the healthcare of the people of the United States, to give us food stamps for those struggling to buy food. And it really is just a pathetic and disgusting crime. I mean, it's crime against our own people. And that's why I'm asking, do you feel the American government cares about the American people? Because ostensibly, that's why they exist, right? Is to do things for the American people. That's the idea. That's the concept. That's what we're supposed to believe. That's the slogan on the flag, tattooed across the flag, right? Here's the article about millions losing food stamps, what we still call food stamps, despite the fact that there's really no stamps involved. Millions who get their SNAP food assistance are about to see a reduction in their benefits. Most federal pandemic assistance is coming to an end. That means millions who qualify for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, will be losing benefits. As the pandemic SNAP benefits are phased out, people will receive about $90 less each month on average. Some households will see a cut of up to $250 a month. And, for those of you not on food stamps, I mean, I'm not on food stamps, but I think it's tough to imagine what it's like to literally not be able to afford food and to need to rely on what many of us consider a small amount of money. I mean, $250 is it's like that's half a, that can be a car payment or something, or a half a car payment, depending on what kind of car that people pay. That's many people go to the grocery store and they spend $250 in one visit to a grocery store. I mean, at an organic food store, I think that's one head of broccoli is $250. So it's tough to imagine the poverty that is crushing so many Americans while we're sending $100 billion to Ukraine for neo-Nazis to fight, while we're sending missiles to Taiwan. It's tough to even comprehend it. But that's what's going on, and that's what your ruling elite think is okay, is normal. Oh, one little side point in here is NPR was just labeled today on Twitter as American state media, which of course it is, which is pretty funny. But I think that Twitter should put that badge on all U.S. mainstream media, because they are corporate media. Those same corporations own our congresspeople, because we are a corporate entity. This government we have here, we live in an inverted totalitarian system ruled by the anonymous corporate state. So if the corporate state owns our government and owns our media, then our media is state media. And so really, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all of them should have something that says American state media, American corporate state media, right there across it. While the U.S. government, and thank you for all the answers, I really appreciate them. Keep them coming in on whether the U.S. government cares at all about the American people. To me, if they wanted to pretend to care about the American people, you would keep at least fucking food and healthcare going during these times as you send $100 billion to Ukraine. Just that little bit to prove you still give a shit about the American people. But no, they can't manage that. They can't. While all that's going on, U.S. war planners continue to court China's neighbors. This is at Counterpunch. The War Department's backbench, the U.S. State Department. I love that expression. I don't know if that's the first, if they're the first ones to come up with that. But the war agencies, the war machine's backbench, the State Department, is working overtime to curry favor with potential friends, well, at least not enemies, in the region closer to China's border. Because the U.S. was bored, and we're like, let's just push towards nuclear war. It's been a minute since we've put. No, it hasn't actually been a minute. It's been actually, we just never really stopped. But still, we could push towards more nuclear war. Undersecretary of State Victoria Nuland, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that name. She may have been involved in creating the proxy war in Ukraine. The neoconservative who in 2014 passed out pastries in Ukraine's Maidan Square. And you may recall the reason that they're mentioning Maidan Square is it's actually called the Maidan Revolution. But really, it was not a revolution. It was a U.S.-backed coup. Maidan Square was the center of the protest that ultimately caused that coup. And so she was apparently literally there handing out pastries. That sounds like a not a euphemism, but like an idiom or something. She was, I guess a euphemism as well, but she was there handing out pastries. But no, she was literally there handing out pastries. She then plotted Ukraine's transition government. There's leaked phone calls that she did not want to get out that have gotten out of her planning Ukraine's follow-up government after the coup. She recently visited the South Asian nations of Sri Lanka and Nepal in what critics suspect is preparation for yet another U.S. proxy war, this one with China over the future of Taiwan. In tandem with Nuland's Asian jaunt this year, CIA Director William Burns secretly flew into Sri Lanka, angering the leader of the Communist Party of Sri Lanka, who said Burns was there to facilitate the donation of biometric immigration control system. Oh, great. The granting of access to submarine telecommunications cables and data, and the review of a status of forces agreement. Or maybe, went the rumors, Burns came to propose Sri Lanka welcome a formal U.S. military base, which might risk contamination of land and water in a beautiful island nation with forests, wetlands, and beaches. Sri Lanka enjoys the title of the nation with the greatest biodiversity per unit area in all of Asia. Who has the heart to turn this paradise home to over 200 species of butterfly, 200 hard coral, and 3,000 flowering plants into a proxy war's bombed out battlefield? In the heels of his visit to Sri Lanka, Burns also planned to travel to Nepal, but they ultimately, the Nepalese government barred him from touching down, saying a visit on such short notice would set a dangerous precedent. So there you have it. Let's turn Sri Lanka, the largest biodiversity in all of Asia, into a burned out battlefield. And fun fact, the largest biodiversity in our hemisphere is Steve Bannon. Yeah, actually has all kinds of shit growing on him. Plants, bacteria. It's a cornucopia of shit living there. Anyway, the U.S. continues to try and encircle China with military bases. Don't forget, the U.S. military has 800 to 900 military bases around the world. It was higher during the war in Afghanistan. It's decreased some now, but now we're trying to increase that around China. Meanwhile, China has one military base outside of China. So slight difference there. Slight. So they do all of that. They put all of that effort in. They send all of that money to do those things. They are, it's not just weaponry, but they send money to these countries in other forms of aid in order to curry favor to these nations. All of that money that is dumped around the world, can't bring it home. Can't use it for medical care for our people. Can't use it to clean up Palestine, Ohio. Can't use it to clean up all of the lead in the water pipes. Can't use it to help the people out who are homeless and houseless in this country. Can't use it to, help the people who are so poor that they're getting paid to have their blood extracted across this nation, which is the number one exporter of paid blood donations, meaning our state is now our country. I mean, when I say our state is now a vampiric nation, and in fact, the top vampiric nation around the world. Can't do any of that, but man, can we fucking send some goddamn javelin missiles. That's right. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Let's get to Finland joining NATO. And again, mainstream media doesn't really want you talking about this. I'm not saying they haven't covered Finland joining NATO. They have a little bit, but 23/7 coverage of Trump, and then they'll reserve that last hour, pieces of that last hour for Finland joining NATO. But before I get to that, please take a second to hit subscribe, hit share, hit the thumbs up. It'd be awesome if everybody's watching could also hit the thumbs up. I'm always fighting the algorithms. I am the most censored comedian in America. I'm one of the most censored journalists, but I don't want to say the most censored journalist. And of course, if you're talking outside of America, you got to throw Julian Assange in that mix. And I am nowhere as censored as Julian Assange, who continues to be tortured in Belmarsh prison after 10 years of confinement by the U.S. government. But most censored comedian, no one's yet shown me a fellow comedian who's had over 2,000 videos banned on YouTube and an entire channel with 250,000 subscribers banned globally on YouTube. So I rely on you guys to keep going and keep doing this, and I'd love for you to become members at leecamp.net. That being said, let's keep it moving. And my new book comes out soon, my new ebook, Dangerous Ideas. You can get it if you become a member, a paying member at leecamp.net. The lowest is $6 a month. So basically $2, less than $2 a week. But all right, Finland joining NATO in a move for more war. Now, this is the exact opposite of the propaganda that our media will feed you, that our media will spray at you constantly. They will say they're joining NATO to stop war, right? They're joining NATO to create peace. NATO is a peace-creating entity. But that is not true at all. NATO is a military entity. NATO creates wars, creates military, creates death and destruction. Just look at Libya, which was the destruction of Libya was led by NATO forces. At the end of the day, you had a country that was one of the most developed and successful countries in Africa turned into literally just battling warlords and open slave markets. And that's NATO. That's NATO. That's all you need to know. Like, you don't need to go through the entire history of NATO. You can give one example, one and done. You can give a one and done example of what NATO is and know that it is no good for anyone. Finland has now joined after basically refusing to join or not being a part of it for years. And Finland shares a border with Russia. So yet again, NATO is pushing closer and closer to Russia's borders. I mean, now they're on Russia's borders. This is a push towards nuclear war. And as I've said before, the U.S. basically runs headlong towards nuclear war, everything we can do to push towards nuclear war, towards nuclear Armageddon. And we hope that Russia and China and some other countries will be the adults in the room and not actually push the button. It's amazing to see this propaganda as they run around acting like this is a peace-seeking move. Finland formally joined NATO on Tuesday, its flag unfurling outside the military bloc's Brussels headquarters in a historic policy shift brought on by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Finland's accession, ending 7 decades of military non-alignment. Basically, if you want to rephrase that, ending 7 decades of peace, ending 7 decades of not being in a military pact with a military entity that has been involved in war over those past 7 decades. You know what Finland hasn't been involved in the past 7 decades? War. You know what NATO has been involved in? And the U.S., of course? War. So basically, Finland is jumping into a group that regularly is involved in war and leaving their position as a non-warlike people. Like, you can't deny that definition. There's no arguing against that. Even if you wanted to argue NATO's a wonderful thing and we need to stand up to Russia, but you can't argue that NATO hasn't been involved in war over the past 7 decades, but you can argue Finland has. So that sounds like a switch, right? We go from being not involved in war for 7 decades to joining an entity that is regularly involved in war. 7 decades of military non-alignment roughly doubles the length of the border of NATO that NATO shares with Russia and bolsters its eastern flank. Yeah, a lot of propaganda in this Reuters article. As the war in Ukraine grinds on with no resolution in sight. And Russia has said they will respond, that they will have countermeasures. Again, we need to hope that they'll be the adults in the room and not do anything hasty. But so that's Finland. Sweden has requested to join NATO, which would be yet another country that has seen 7 decades of not being involved in war. And this would make them joining. This would be them joining an organization of war and killing. And of course, who gets killed the most in these innocent civilians? I'd say generally get killed the most. I mean, certainly in the U.S. invasions in these wars. Millions of refugees just out of Ukraine, thousands of innocent people killed. And that's what war is. It's horrific. And it's the failure of a species to act evolved, the failure of our species to actually do something that is evolved and sit down and settle these things at a table. It is horrific. The only reason Sweden has not yet joined NATO is because Turkey so far has, well, they kind of fought against it, but then they said they'd do it if they got all kinds of things, all kinds of kind of bribery in order to let Sweden in. And so far that hasn't happened. So for the moment, Turkey continues to stop Sweden from joining. We'll see if that keeps up. But you know, these are not good steps for where the world stands. And of course, your mainstream media will, even if they do cover it, will give you the surface level coverage of this. Finland joining NATO, they're scared of Russia, so they need to stand up to Russia, blah, blah, blah. That's the extent of it. And even if you agreed with that analysis, which is incorrect, if you aren't going to say that the U.S. was at least involved in creating a proxy war, but it never gets down to the deeper layers of what NATO is, of the fact that Finland has been a peaceful nation for 7 decades and now won't be. It really never gets to any of those deeper levels. The fact that the real reason there is a proxy war right now between U.S. and Russia has to do with the quote unquote great power conflict that the U.S. foreign policy is focused on right now. And the real reason they view great power conflict as what's as the major problem, the major threat to the United States, is because of the threat to U.S. economic hegemony. The petrodollar is waning. Many countries are standing up and going outside of it. Without the petrodollar, the U.S. can't print as much money as we want, as we've been doing. The interview I did today, I didn't know this number. I knew we printed trillions during the pandemic, but Professor Mahoney that I spoke to earlier today, he said the U.S. increased our money supply by 20% in the pandemic spending fest that went on. The sending $4.5 trillion to Wall Street, etc., just increased our money supply by 20%. If another country increased their money supply by 20%, you would not see inflation the levels we're seeing. You would see crazy inflation. And the U.S. doesn't because of the petrodollar. But if countries start going outside the petrodollar, either because of that they just start trading outside of dollars, or because that countries stop using fossil fuels, then it would crush the dollar. And so that's really at the heart of a lot of what's going on here, why there's a proxy war. Speaking of this proxy war, this is coming out of the Washington Post. Don't talk about Nord Stream. Washington Post on the Nord Stream attack. Leaders see little benefit from digging deeply and finding an uncomfortable answer. For all the intrigue around who bombed the pipeline, some Western officials are not so eager to find out. I wonder why that is. Why would they not want to know who bombed that pipeline? Which, by the way, was 3 pipelines. Who bombed? It seems like they'd want to know, right? Because that pipeline was between Russia, yes, but also Germany. So Germany's an ally, and someone attacked our allies' pipeline. Wow, we should really want to know who that is, right? We should really want to dig into that. Nope. No, we don't. And neither do the other European nations. Western officials are not so eager to find out. This is from the Washington Post. At gatherings of European and NATO policymakers, officials have settled into a rhythm, said one senior European diplomat. Don't talk about Nord Stream. Leaders see little benefit from digging too deeply and finding an uncomfortable answer, the diplomat said, echoing sentiments of several peers in other countries who said they would rather not have to deal with the possibility that Ukraine or allies were involved. I love that they just say Ukraine or allies. It was the fucking United States. All right, that's who did it. It was the United States working with some other countries, but that's why they don't want to dig into it, because they can't do fuck all about it. If they find out it's the United States, what are NATO allies going to do? Are they going to attack the United States? Are they going to sanction the United States? Are they going to do anything against the United States? Fucking no. They're vassal states. The EU are vassal states to the United States. They are little subservient servants. All right. That's what they are. They're courtesans. And there's nothing they can do. And if they were to try to do anything, the U.S., again, thanks to the dollar and combined with our military power, would crush them. So, some people are wondering why Germany. Oh, do I still have this? I don't think I have it up. Oh, but maybe I can pull it up pretty quick. There was a German lawmaker who was saying exactly this, but the real reason that she's... Oh, by the way, I have that vote also on my Twitter. It's a poll if you want to vote. what does the U.S. government care about the American people when we're knocking everyone off of Medicaid and food stamps while sending billions to Ukraine and sending Javelin missiles to Taiwan? You can answer on that poll on Twitter. I'm at Lee Camp. But anyway, here's the German lawmaker who also makes a great point about the U.S. occupying Germany.
Miteinander aber heißt, dass wir das bisherige Verhältnis einer extremen Unterwürfigkeit der Bundesrepublik gegenüber einer US-amerikanischen Außenpolitik aufkündigen, die geprägt ist von Krieg, Völkerrechtsbrüchen und Putschunterstützung. Und deshalb sagen wir auch, nach 78 Jahren ist es an der Zeit, dass die US-Soldaten nach Hause gehen. Alle anderen Alliierten haben längst Deutschland verlassen. Die US-Militärstützpunkte verhalten sich wie extraterritoriale Gebiete, auf denen das Grundgesetz ausgehebelt ist. Von deutschem Boden werden völkerrechtswidrige US-Kriege, Drohnenmorde und Folterflüge mit durchgeführt. Und als gelte immer noch das Besatzungsstatut, laden die USA zu den Rammstein-Formaten in Deutschland ein. Es gab mal eine Zeit, da hatte der Deutsche Bundestag mehr Mut. Ich erinnere an den Beschluss zum Abzug der US-Atomwaffen 2010, auch auf Initiative des FDP-Außenministers Westerwelle. Dieser Beschluss ist bis heute nicht umgesetzt worden. Diese Zeiten sind lange vorbei, aber wir bleiben dabei. Die US-Atomwaffen müssen weg. Jetzt lässt sich die Bundesregierung von den USA mit der Lieferung der Leopard-Panzer mitten ins Feuer schicken. Jetzt weigert sich die Bundesregierung, eine internationale Untersuchungskommission zur Aufklärung der Terroranschläge auf die Nord Stream-Pipelines mit zu unterstützen. Ich sage, Terror und Anschläge unter Freunden, das geht gar nicht. Die US-Administration vermittelt den Eindruck, sie wolle gar keine Alliierten, sondern schlicht Vasallentreue. Das aber wollen sich immer weniger Staaten weltweit gefallen lassen, und das ist auch gut so. Grundlage für eine gemeinsame Freundschaft sollten die Achtung von Menschen- und Völkerrecht sein. Warum aber, fragt man sich, weigert sich die Bundesregierung auch nach 20 Jahren, den US-Angriffskrieg auf den Irak als Völkerrechtsbruch zu verurteilen?
There you go. She fucking nailed it. I always love, there's always like one or two lawmakers in Ireland, in Germany that fucking knock it out the park and just destroy everyone sitting there, who are all left looking like fucking trolls. But, and she's like, after 78 years, why is the U.S. still occupying Germany? Why does the U.S. still have nuclear weapons here when we voted to remove the nuclear weapons? Why are we not looking into the terrorist act that destroyed our own pipeline, that has people in Germany freezing during the winter? Why is that not a concern of ours? Because the real reason is that the leadership in Germany, as in most of the states in the EU, have become essentially vassal states to the United States. And someone's asking where they can see that speech. I retweeted it on my Twitter. So at Lee Camp, you'll find it there. Anyway, I also want to get to a video by Marco Rubio that hits on what we're talking about right now, where Marco Rubio kind of accidentally said the quiet part loud about the petrodollar. I think he didn't mean to, or he didn't really understand what the fuck he's saying. I mean, he's not a bright dude. We're not talking about an Einstein here. But anyway, Marco Rubio was interviewed, and if you pay attention to what he's saying, he's basically saying that we need to worry about countries going outside the dollar, because then we can't, if it loses weight, we can't crush other countries. Like, it really is. These people are so, I mean, when you're a true sociopath, you don't kind of even understand what your words mean to average people. So let's see this.
Today, Brazil, in our hemisphere, largest country in the Western Hemisphere south of us, cut a trade deal with China. They're going to, from now on, do trade in their own currencies, get right around the dollar. They're creating a secondary economy in the world, totally independent of the United States. We won't have to talk about sanctions in 5 years because there'll be so many countries transacting in currencies other than the dollar that we won't have the ability to sanction them. Today, Brazil, in our hemisphere, largest country in the Western Hemisphere.
All right, so there's Marco Rubio. He is saying it like, oh my God, what is wrong with these countries? Why would they do such a thing? He doesn't even notice that it's like tyrannical to be like, these other countries, they made an agreement, China and Brazil made an agreement to interact in their own currency. What? I mean, that's thinking you own the world is what that is, which he probably does think the U.S. owns the world. But and he points out one of the biggest positives of this happening, of countries standing up and going outside the petrodollar, is that in various ways they can't be sanctioned as easily. And the U.S. has sanctions on dozens of countries around this globe. And what do sanctions do? They harm the poor, the weak, the children, the elderly. That's who sanctions hurt the most and the quickest. The others, the rich, the oligarchy in whatever country, are generally not that harmed, almost ever. So it is deciding that it's okay. I mean, Madeleine Albright said it was acceptable that 500,000 children had died in Iraq by our sanctions. She said it was worth it. And that's what these fucking sociopaths think. They think it's worth it to kill children, to kill the elderly, so that we can try and bend a country to our will. And he here in this video is fretting that the U.S., that China and Brazil and other countries could dare go outside of the petrodollar, because then we won't be able to sanction them. He's upset that we're not going to be able to kill children and elderly and poor. Very, very upsetting. Very upsetting. And, you know, again, this is him speaking on Fox News, and most of the people watching this are so propagandized that they believe this. He's right. This is wrong. China and Brazil shouldn't have done that. That was mean of them, and they're not listening to us. Why should we own the world? Why? Like, have we proven to be good stewards of the world? Has U.S. hegemony been good for the world as we see it collapse under the weight of climate crisis, as we see it collapse even outside of just climate crisis? Even if you are a sad, pathetic, ignorant soul who thinks the climate crisis is not real, the environment is collapsing in other ways as well. It's collapsing in the amount of plastics. We all have microplastics in our system right now. A million bottles of water are used around the globe per minute. Per minute. I talk about that on the latest episode of Most Censored News. It's just unbelievable the way we're killing the planet. And that's not even talking about the war. That's not even talking about the sanctions, killing the poor. Like, that is what we are causing. And we deserve to have hegemony. We deserve to control. He said the word secondary economy. He said they're basically involved in a secondary economy. Well, what does that mean? The primary economy is fucking ours, the petrodollar. He's saying there should only be one economy in the world, our dollar. And that is it. But, you know, he's one of the sociopaths. He's one of them. And since I just mentioned the climate crisis, I want to get to another story before we go over to justrumble.com/Lee Camp. We'll do that next. But this is actually a good news story, a positive of the fight to do something, anything about the climate crisis. And for those of you, I just want to say, for those of you who, and I know there's a lot of you out there who say climate crisis is not happening, or it's happened many times in Earth's history, or it's just a thing made up for Bill Gates to have power or whatever. Couple of things. First of all, has it happened many times in Earth's history? Yes, it has. It has. over millions of fucking years, not over a dozen, you idiot. Second, could it be used by the ruling elite who are corrupt as fuck to do various things? Yeah, it could. It could. Some of what they want could be a terrible idea. That doesn't change the fact that it's happening. What they don't want is for us to get off fossil fuels. They absolutely don't want that. And so when you say climate crisis is not happening and therefore we don't have to get off fossil fuels, you're being a bootlicker, all right? You are licking the boots of the fascist ruling elite. You are bent over at the feet of, I'll try and make this not sexual. You are bent over at the feet of the Donald Trumps, the Joe Bidens, the fucking World Economic Forum. You are bent over at the feet of the Black Rocks, at the feet of the big oil, the Rex Tillersons out there, the Exxons, the Shells, the BPs. You are bent over, licking their boots, saying, yes, sir, I will do whatever you want, because they love nothing more than for you to say there's either not a climate crisis or it doesn't matter, or it's a good thing. Yeah, it's healthy for the planet to change every once in a while. It's healthy to have hundreds of millions of refugees around the world running for their lives because their area of the world is no longer livable. Just wonderful. Just wonderful. So, enjoy being a bootlicker. Enjoy getting over and bending over and licking the feet of ExxonMobil and all the others. If that's really what you want, of licking the feet of every U.S. ruling elite who, guess what? Petro, right there in the world, right? So do you think they want to be outside of Petro? Fucking no. No. So if you want to lick their boots, then you go right ahead. You grease up that tongue, get to work, have at it. But I'll tell you something. I have no interest in being a part of that. I have no interest in supporting big oil, supporting our ruling elite, any of that. So, yeah, if you want to do that, then do it. Anyway, Montana. This is the slight bit of good news in all of this. Montana repeals their state energy policy as a climate trial nears. Now, what does that mean? Well, 16 Montana children and teens have sued the state. They say Montana's promotion of oil, coal, and gas, despite the climate emergency, violates their state constitutional rights. And what did Montana repeal in fear of what this trial will mean? Montana has repealed its 30-year energy policy, including a 2011 amendment, and this is my favorite part, 2011 amendment to prioritize fossil fuel development. The move comes as a June trial date approaches for a youth-led climate lawsuit against the state. In the lawsuit, held versus state of Montana, 16 Montana children and teenagers say they've been actively promoting a fossil fuel-based energy system that is dangerous to the climate. State officials are violating the right to a clean and healthful environment. That's in their constitution. It's probably in most state constitutions. A right to a clean and healthful environment for present and future generations under the state constitution. It is the first constitutional climate case to go to trial in the United States. So Montana first enacted their state energy policy in 1993. Since then, it has been revised and updated. In 2011, they amended the policy to add provisions calling for increased fossil fuel development. I love the idea you have to increase fossil fuel development right now. We really need to. And by the way, development is a euphemism for fucking extraction. So they have to increase fossil fuel extraction, oil and petroleum extraction out of the ground right now in the middle of a climate crisis, along with references to developing other energy resources and technologies like wind, green, and hydrogen batteries. The 2011 legislation, this is my favorite part, added a provision to the Montana Environmental Policy Act that prohibited environmental reviews, prohibited reviews of state projects, including energy development, extraction, from, even the word energy, of course, is a euphemism, of oil and gas extraction, from considering impacts beyond state borders. They prohibited it. They prohibited reviewing what would happen to the environment outside of the state? Which is like it's so hilarious to put that in the law. Like, don't you dare look at what's happened to the environment. Don't dare, whatever you do, don't look at what's happening there. Just don't even close your jaw. And if you look at what's happening environmentally, we will arrest you. So anyway, Montana has now repealed this because they're anticipating that they very well could lose this trial brought by teens in the state saying they don't have a future. It's great news, and hopefully there can be more of this going on around this country. People using lawfare for good rather than for evil. Of course, the biggest example of that is Donziger winning that case against Chevron, and Chevron then coming after him and locking him up in his own apartment, house arrest for 3 years, because he won a case against them, because he beat them, because they had polluted and destroyed the lives of Ecuadorians, and therefore they decided to get back at him rather than pay the Ecuadorians for the trouble and harm and deaths. There were many deaths. So Chevron's killed many people. Rather than pay that money, they went after Donziger. So I wanted to bring you there some good news. All right, I actually have a lot left to cover. We're going to go way past the end of the hour, and that's coming up at rumble.com/Lee Camp, completely free to go watch over there, rumble.com/Lee Camp. By the way, become a member at leecamp.net, and you will get my new ebook coming out soon called Dangerous Ideas, filled with all of the dangerous concepts and thoughts that I talk about regularly. And I think you'll really love it. But you only get it if you're a subscribing member at leecamp.net. Let's see. I'm putting the link right now for the Rumble episode. If you want to come join me over there, you just click that link. It'll take you straight there. It's completely free to watch. And I will see you there. I'm about to show a video of protesters utterly destroying Nancy Pelosi. Well worth your time to watch this video of them standing up and screaming at her, but much of what they're saying are really great points. That's the best kind of heckling. It's not just, you fucking suck. It's like, if you actually listen to what they're saying, it's not that easy to argue against. All right, I'm going to show you that in 1 second, but goodbye to the other platforms. This is the new time, by the way, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon